So,
Yeah, nice to meet you, Ingrid.
okay. Bye
Okay,
bye.
great. Glad you could
Bye.
meet Jody.
Yeah.
So yeah, go ahead. So I don't know if Bill, William, if you want to stay a little bit
Yeah, I'll
here.
be
Yeah,
happy.
okay. Go ahead.
Okay, so you want me to talk about what we do in my lab and introduce myself a little bit?
Yeah,
So,
that'd be great.
okay, sure. So, I've been at BYU now for almost 6 years, and like Jody said, I have a neuroscience background. Um, but I started researching sensory processing in autism, and that has transitioned to me studying empathy and how to facilitate empathy between autistic and neurotypical people. Because I feel like when we have gaps in empathy, everybody loses, and so we see a lot of marginalization and dehumanization and things like that in the autistic community when empathy is lacking. But we also see problems for neurotypical people when empathy is lacking. So for years and years and years, people said that autistic people could not empathize with other people. In fact, the term mind blindness was coined to sort of describe this problem that people thought they had. But more recent work is showing that neurotypical people are just as likely to misunderstand or not be able to empathize with an autistic person as an autistic person might be able to misunderstand a neurotypical person, and we call that the double empathy problem. Um, and so we're trying to understand that and trying to figure out how to overcome the double empathy problem. And I think that uh, at the root, or maybe the origin of this double empathy problem, is the tendency that autistic and neurotypical people have to process information and process the world around them very differently. So the way that they bring in sensory information, the way that they allocate their attention, the way that they cognitively and emotionally process things is often very, very different, and that puts their minds far apart. And so the further two minds are from each other, the harder it is for those two people to empathize, right? And so how do we bring them more into alignment and synchrony? So we're using neuroscientific as well as other quantitative and qualitative methods to try to understand the minds of autistic and neurotypical people and try to figure out how to bring them together. And we've also now started to take our scientific findings and give them to artists so that they can visually or otherwise represent the minds of autistic and neurotypical people so that we can put them side by side and see the similarities and differences and maybe allow people to more easily see each other's minds where it might be really difficult for them to see each other's minds naturally. So we've been using visual art. I'm going to be talking to a photographer coming up. We're doing a storytelling event where autistic people are going to take the stage and tell their stories, again, as sort of a window into the minds of each individual, but also autistic or neurotypical people as a group. So I guess that's what we're doing in a nutshell.
Great. I'm sure you're familiar with Simon Baron Cohen and his research on and so we're the Empathy Center. I've been working on the topic of empathy for about 15 years, and we have this nonprofit, the Empathy Center, and our vision is actually or to make mutual empathy a primary social cultural value. And we have all kinds of different projects. I don't know how much you saw of our different projects, and um, we've done everything from you have training curriculum to an empathy tent that goes out where we offer listening, on the street to people, and also go to like where there's conflict between the political left and right. We listen to both sides and try to bring them together. We have a practice called the Empathy Circle, which is our core practice based on the work of Carl Rogers, active listening, but in small groups, which we could actually do here. I'd be very curious what like with your work, how an empathy circle would work, let's say with people who are autistic and non. Because I've done it with others, like someone who's a Simon. There's a Sam Vaknin. He's was known for being a psychopath, narcissist, and I did an empathy circle with him. For example, so we just kind of bring everybody into the empathy circle, and it actually worked, really well. I thought so. So anyway, those are just some ideas, and this group is our goal is to because of the confusion of the definition of empathy. So I'm kind of curious what your definition would be when you're talking about empathy. Because I know Simon Baron Cohen is talking about cognitive empathy, emotional empathy, saying the cognitive empathy is difficult for people with autism versus they could do affective, but it's kind of it's really, we're kind of talking about different things when we're talking about empathy, and we're just trying to get, kind of some clarity, try to create some material that adds clarity to that. So, yeah. So,
Yeah,
um,
the definition is a little squirrely, isn't it?
did you have any thoughts, Jody, what you want to do? We could try a little empathy circle to introduce Garrett to the
Yeah, I
practice
think that would
because
be really great. Was Rosa going to join us?
I thought so, but she is not here. So,
Okay, because I was looking back at the email and I wonder if she may have gotten her times wrong because she's saying that 10 a.m. your time should be 11 a.m. her time in Costa Rica. And I don't think that those times line up.
oh, yeah, it's
So
probably.
she may have been, I don't know, she may have been confused about the time.
Hmm, okay. I didn't see her email about that, so
Oh, okay.
I guess we'll have to hopefully next week. So, would you be up for doing an empathy circle, Garrett? Just a short one to kind of see how the practice works, and I'll
Yeah,
ask
sure.
Bill and William if you're wanting to stay uh,
Yeah,
or okay, very cool. Um, okay. So an empathy circle, have you seen the instructions, Garrett, for how an empathy circle works?
No.
Okay. So an empathy circle is there's uh, five different roles in the empathy circle, or four roles, I think. There's the speaker, someone who's going to be speaking, and they're going to select the person that's going to be their listener. And then there's the active listener, this person that is listening to the speaker. And then there's the silent listeners, the people who aren't speaking or just listening to what's happening. And then there's the facilitator that just holds the space and just kind of keeps everybody in the process and maybe keeps time. And do we have a timekeeper? Somebody would like to keep time, maybe 3 minute turns. Looks like
I can
William.
do it.
Okay,
I'll do
thanks.
it.
And
Three
so
minutes.
it'll be 3 minute turns. And our I don't know what's a good question, Jody. We like
Mhm.
what's your how do you define empathy or
I mean,
what
that
is
does seem to be the topic of the meeting. So I think
okay,
that's
so
a great way to start.
eh, and we have a topic. How do you define empathy and anything that's on your mind? So we also leave it open so you can talk about anything that kind of you have energy for. So as the listener, I mean as the speaker, you select your listener. So um, I can be the first listener, and maybe Garrett, if you like to be the first speaker. You can talk. You share an idea or two about what's on your mind or the definition of empathy, and then you pause, and I'll reflect back my understanding of what you've said. So that's basic active listening, if you're familiar with that. And then you check, did I hear you correctly? And if I did, then you continue with your train of thought, and then pausing periodically and until the time is up, and William will like hold up his hand or something. Yeah, the time is up, and at that point, am the listener. Then it's my turn to select. Um, I turn to become the speaker, and I select my listener, and then I continue that. We continue with that in the process for the time allotted. We could maybe give it 30 minutes. Um, and yeah, and I don't know if there's anything else, Bill or William. That's it.
Well,
That's pretty
the
much.
idea that the listening, the feedback, there's no judgment, there's no advice, there's no pity, there's no agreement, there's no disagreement.
Hmm.
It's just a reflection of the essence of what was the object being for the speaker to be heard.
Feel heard to their satisfaction. So be heard and understood to their satisfaction. And so we could just get the best way to do it is just to learn is just to do it. And as the listener, I can also, the only thing I can say, oh, please pause so I can reflect back what I'm hearing in case you're going on for a long time. So would you like to start? And I'll be the
Sure.
listener. I'm
Sure.
listening.
Okay, so I don't think I have a concise definition of empathy, ready to go right now, but this is how I think about it. I think we all have a cognitive environment that it's different than the physical environment that we're in. It's what's inside our head, and it's made up of, again, how we bring in information, how we attend to things, what's relevant to us, the predictions that our mind makes about people and the environment.
Okay, can you pause there? Let me
Yeah,
just reflect back.
yeah.
That's a lot. So you don't have a sort of ready off the shelf definition of empathy, but you're saying that we all have a cognitive sort of a mind, and it's like that's what you're sort of explaining. Oh,
Yep, yep. And so empathy is at least a two-person endeavor. So we each have our cognitive environments. And I think empathy happens when cognitive environments are close, aligned, synchronized, perhaps overlapping in some way. And empathy is difficult when cognitive environments are really far apart.
So for you, there everyone has their cognitive environment, and when the cognitive environments come together, that's empathy, and when they're very far apart, that's it's difficult for being
Yeah,
empathic.
yeah, and I think that I kind of like the distinction between cognitive empathy, affective empathy, and then empathic concern or compassion that comes out of empathy sometimes, um, because each of those has a piece of the cognitive environment that it is associated with, I think.
So you like the model that's out there of affective, cognitive empathy because that so each of those kind of addresses a different aspect of humans. Just one second.
Yep.
Okay, sorry. Just had a,
Okay. Um, I also think that empathy, to some degree, is a mirror. Um, we sort of see in others a lot of times how we look at ourselves, or how, we can only interpret the emotions of another person through the emotions that we have felt ourselves. And so in a way, we sometimes maybe project a little bit and understand other people based on our own experience. So I think empathy can also be a mirror.
Mhm. So another definition of empathy is it's a mirror so that we can understand other people through our own experience as well.
Yeah.
It looks like that's the time. Okay. Do you feel understood for what you've said?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
so.
Okay. Oh, great. So I'll speak to Jody,
Okay.
and yeah, the it's interesting the cognitive because um, that sort of model, the cognitive and affective empathy, I just find it really I find it too academic, for kind of regular discussion, for the lay people, and I find it rather confusing. Yeah.
Okay,
Um,
so you're saying that the terms cognitive and affective empathy tend to be too academic for lay audiences to
yeah,
engage with.
and it does seem to be the most common definition out there: affective, cognitive, and then empathic concern or compassion. I just see that in the literature a lot in articles and stuff.
Okay, and in the literature, it does tend to be the three different areas being cognitive empathy, affective empathy, and then empathic concern or compassion. It tends to come up a lot.
And in the definition model that we're working on, I call it the holistic empathy, model. That one of the aspects I want to kind of look at is that the cognitive and emotional or feelings is sort of so enmeshed and merged together that you can't really pull it apart. It's just too confusing. Like, yeah.
Okay, and so really trying to separate out cognitive empathy from emotional empathy doesn't really work because they're so enmeshed with each other. They're very connected, the whole process.
Yeah. And the other thing is how do we map our definition into what we're doing right now? That's the other part that we're wanting to do. So as you're listening to me, you're just sensing into my experience, like, my thoughts, my feelings. Yeah, it's that's what I see as empathy, is what you are doing right now, listening to me, sensing into my experience. So
Okay.
that's for me what empathy is. You're empathizing with me in the moment.
So if we can map it onto this experience with the empathy circle, that's where we get to a clear understanding of what the process is actually like of empathizing. So when I'm engaging with you, I'm listening to what you're saying. I'm sensing into your experience, and I'm reflecting back to you, and hopefully getting to a clear understanding of what you're saying. That is empathy, the way you
Yeah.
define
And
it.
the definitions are so frustrating. I feel a lot of frustration about it's just causing so much, issues with the right, political right saying empathy is terrible, the sin of empathy and everything. And I think it's all because we're just talking about different things.
Yeah, and so to reflect back that last thought, the the different definitions that we have within these discussions about empathy tend to be very frustrating because we're so caught up in how are we defining it that we're not actually empathizing with each other. And an example that you gave is the political right, seeing empathy as a really bad thing.
Hmm. Yeah. At least some people. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel heard. Uh-huh.
Okay. Great. I guess that means it's my turn. And I'm excited to talk to William. Haven't had a chance to talk to you
I'm
yet.
listening.
Okay. Um, so, as I've been researching empathy over the last few years, I've realized that I came into the study of empathy with a very different definition than there is in a lot of the literature. And so I became very confused as I was going through the literature because they were talking about something very different from what I was talking about.
So you entered this field with a basically a preconception of what empathy is, and you're now disabused of that.
That's a good way to say it. Um, and I don't know, actually, I don't think I am disabused of my previous notion of what empathy is, but I had to go through a process of wondering why I define it so differently from a lot of academics.
So you're really curious about the divergence between your perception of what empathy is and what the academic definition is.
Yeah, and like Edwin was saying, there are a lot of definitions that lend themselves to negative outcomes, especially with the book Against Empathy, a lot of other books and articles that are written by people who really think that empathy is a bad thing. And so when I put my definition on that, I felt very affronted by those claims because I thought, how could you be against something that is supposed to bring us together?
So you're looking at all of the definitions that are out there for what empathy is. Some of them are really appalling to you when you look at them against your own perception of what empathy is.
Yeah, and I guess this is a good time to share what my perception of empathy is. I come from a background of international development work, and I left that field because I saw a lot of people from the United States helping with a lot of compassion that was devoid of empathy. And by that, I mean trying to understand the perspective of the person that you're helping.
That was a lot. So that you were involved in international relations, and what happened, what you saw in the field is that people were um, exhibiting a lot of compassion, but they were devoid of empathy.
Yeah, and by that I mean the active willingness to try to see it from the other person's perspective. And so that is not this reactive form of empathy that is talked about a lot in the psychological literature.
So what you saw out there was a lack of people willing to put themselves in others' shoes, if you will.
Yeah, and so when I came into the study of empathy, I thought that that's what we were talking about, is trying to understand another person's perspective. And I think that that aligns with what this group is doing. And so I think I found a good place where my definition of empathy is aligning with other people's.
So you think you found a new home here, a
Mm-hmm.
place that aligns with your own, basically, definition of empathy.
And I'm sure I have more to say, but that was time.
Thank you. Garrett, I'm thrilled to hear you talk about this. I have a degree in psychology, and I also am a practicing Buddhist, and um, and I'm really interested in the research that's going on, especially with fMRI stuff. And I want to know a lot more about your work.
Okay, so you're excited to hear about what I talked about earlier. You have a background in psychology, and you're really interested in some of the neuroscientific work that is happening about empathy.
Right. And you're talking about the different aspects going on in the neurological system, the cognitive and the we have an empathy cafe every week on Sunday. What I find in our cafes is that what's going on is basically emotional empathy, very, very deep, evoking of a lot of powerful emotion.
Yeah, so you started out by talking about like the different aspects of what might be going on in somebody's mind, but then focused on this empathy cafe and how it is evoking these powerful emotions in the people who attend and experience that.
Right. And I'm perceiving myself right now as being an ignoramus. that I'm out of my depth here, and I really want to educate myself about your work. So I really think it's really important.
Okay, yeah, you're feeling a little out of your depth, um, and you'd be open to learning more about how we think about empathy and what we're doing with it. Yeah.
I feel heard. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah.
So you just continue, select your listener, Garrett.
Okay. Well, Bill, I don't know you, but I'm excited to get to know you and talk about this. Would you be my listener for a
I'm
second?
happy to, Gary. Thanks.
Okay. Um, yeah. I mean, like I said, I have a background in audiology and neuroscience, and empathy was not part of my PhD training or really any of my training. So I also feel a little out of my depth and am really eager to learn different ideas and perspectives that can help.
So you were talking about neurology and audiology were in your areas of study. So you do feel a little bit out of depth about empathy. This sort of came up upon you, and you're interested in finding out more about it.
Yeah. And particularly, I'm interested in not only defining empathy, which I think is important, but also figuring out how to build it and facilitate it among groups that have a hard time empathizing.
And so you're not only interested in understanding empathy and defining it, but also looking for various ways to build empathy within social groups.
Yeah, and specifically, autistic and neurotypical people traditionally have had at least in the literature or in common thinking about these two groups, people tend to think that they have a hard time empathizing with each other.
Yeah, and especially with autistic or neuroatypical groups, people feel that they have a hard time connecting with the idea or the concept of empathy or feeling empathy.
Yeah. So how do we bring those two groups together so that both groups can benefit from connection?
So, how do we bring those neuro atypical and typical groups together so that they can make a more satisfying connection?
Yeah, I feel heard.
Right. Thanks. Okay, Daniel.
Love to.
Well, I'm a retired special education teacher, working with 40 years with severely emotionally disturbed kids and also high functioning autistic kids. Um, the young woman you can kind of see to, I think it's to my right, your left maybe, with the hair flying. She was high functioning autistic.
So you are a retired special education teacher, and you've worked with autistic kids as well as high functioning autistic kids. And in your background on Zoom, the girl with the flying hair is one of the higher
Right.
functioning autists.
Yeah, and the one of the first children I worked with was an autistic young man about 6 or 7 who hadn't spoken. And so he spoke his first word with me, which was language master. Did you get that?
Oh, my internet was stuck for a moment.
Okay.
Everything.
I said one of the first kids that I worked with was autistic, and I was trying, he hadn't spoken till 7. And his first word was spoken with me, which I still remember. It's very important. And it was language master.
Yeah, so the one of the first kids, or the first kids you worked with, was an autistic 7-year-old that never
Yeah.
spoke and started speaking when you started working with him, and you still remember that very well.
Yeah. And the epiphany that I made is that a lot of the doctors would say, yeah, they don't feel this or they don't sort of like it was cut off. And the epiphany that I realized over my years of work was that they, they don't have the tools. Autistic kids, don't necessarily have the tools to understand, but they sense the lack of it. They sense the lack of connection. And so, therefore, when I was able to bridge that gap and give them some sort of connection, they were very satisfied and they could adapt.
Right, and so you hesitated adapting the interpretations that, other people would give you in terms of what they feel and what feel, and you figured out that they notice the lack of connection, and if you reach out and you bridge into them, then they're very happy and very responsive to that.
Yeah. And I just had a couple years ago, one of my former students, we went out for coffee. He has his own apartment and job and everything, and it was very gratifying.
Yeah, and just a couple of years ago, one of your former students, probably, if I understand this right, also high functioning autism, now has his own flat and has a life, and it's very satisfying to you that that happened.
And I'll finish up with this. I believe that empathy is simply the psychosocial filter we put on the universe to combine. The same force that takes 2 hydrogen atoms and forms them in H2 is the same force that in us that seeks empathy.
And so you finish with saying that you believe that empathy is like a force in the universe, and the same thing that brings 2 hydrogen atoms together and makes it an H2 is the attractive force between us that brings us together, and that's empathy.
Thank you, I
I
feel.
hope I got
Yeah, you did.
okay.
So the topic question is just what's your definition of empathy or whatever is on your mind?
All right, Edwin, I'll speak to you.
Okay, listening.
Um, First of all, I want to apologize. I've been late here today, just purely uh, space airhead.
Yeah, just apologizing for being an airhead, just having spaced out our meeting time.
Um,
Feeling guilty.
and I can only be here at some of the meetings because even the last one I had a gig doing time in the week, so I want to let all of you know I cannot be here every time.
And you can't be here every time. You just want to let us know that.
Yeah. And so by listening just to this round here today, I was reminded of a discussion I used to have in back then, the conscious breathing community around rebirthing. And we're talking about the 80s and yeah, 80s.
There's this is reminding you of the conscious breathing group that you had been part of in the mid 80s.
Yeah. And reading the article on NPR, partially listening to it, I read through the whole thing, and so this just sort of generates this somewhat consistent picture in me.
And there's just a picture that's being generated in you for having looked at the NPR empathy article piece.
So that it goes more or less in the direction that one person feels something from another person, that the person that feels it gets polluted by, so to speak. If I open myself too empathically to you and you are a bad person, then whatever's going on in you will start affecting me and pollutes me and poisons me.
So your understanding of what they're saying is that if one person has a feeling and you listen to that feeling, that comes into you and kind of pollutes you.
And that's quite widespread in many spiritual communities where people sort of
Mm.
even go as far as not touching each other, not engaging in discussing their spiritual journey because has to be super protected in their oh so sensitive spiritual journey.
Yeah, and it just reminds me of others that spiritual some groups that you have to really protect yourself from other people's energy, and so.
Yeah, and I finished by saying this. I think that's a load of bullshit.
Yeah, and you just think that that's a load of bullshit, that sort of mindset and view.
You don't want to take responsibility for your own emotions, and you blame others for exposing them to emotions that you can't handle. But that's not onto the others, that's on you.
Yeah, that's actually not blame the other person, whoever has whatever emotions they have. It's your responsibility, so it's you should take that on.
And
Yeah,
and I have a resounding
that was
clear
time too. So.
position on that.
Yeah, you
I'm
feel
done.
strongly about it. It's a resounding, strong feeling about it. Damn it. I'll speak to Garrett.
Hey, I'm listening.
Yeah, I love what Daniel was saying because I see that too. That in fact, that phenomenon is a lack of empathy on. Oh, it's not a lack of empathy. That phenomenon that Daniel is talking about could be addressed by the listener's empathy. That instead of taking on what the emotions is just by empathizing with it, you don't take it on, but you do hear it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, so you're saying that that by using empathy
Hmm.
effectively, you don't have to take on the negative stuff that other people might be bringing to the table, but you can actually I don't know, adaptively deal with it.
Yeah, you hear it, but uh you don't agree with it, you don't disagree with it necessarily, but you do sense into the experience. And that's what I love about empathy. It creates that space. It's actually, in a sense, it's a very grounding sort of a space to be in.
Yeah, so not making you hear things, you like you said, sense into things. You don't necessarily have to take them on or
Hmm.
make a judgment, but you just allow them to happen, and you can understand the other person by doing that. And when you do that, it's very grounding.
Yeah, and actually, the empathy circle helps with that process. So, what if somebody's like, "Oh, I'm all pissed off. I'm having life is horrible and so forth, and it's all your fault," just by reflecting back. So you think life is horrible and it's all my fault, right? So it's sort of what we're doing in the empathy circle is actually a practice for how to deal with that with that issue of taking on other people's energy or what have you.
Yeah, so the method of the empathy circle can um, help you sort of exercise this empathy muscle and get better at dealing with these situations without being negatively affected by things.
Yeah, exactly. So I had done some interviews where we called it empathizing with racism. So, right, there's this thing, oh, racism is terrible. We have to be anti-racism. But I think what you do is you empathize with racism, you empathize with misogyny, you empathize with authoritarianism, you empathize with wokeism, you just empathize with everything, right? So you're not against it, but you try to empathize it, and you kind of have a sense of it creates a sense of connection and understanding, and it's transformative too.
Yeah, yeah. So empathizing um, doesn't require that you agree
Hmm.
with certain perspectives, but you can try to understand where people are coming from.
And it's transformative in the sense that by understanding it and empathizing with it, you actually create connection, and it actually transforms, it just transforms in a positive way the relationship, or it
Yeah,
can.
yeah, yeah. So this whole process is very transformative. Um,
Yeah, in a positive way.
in a positive way, and perhaps for both parties.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I feel very heard. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, let's see. So, all right, William, you chose me, so I'm gonna choose you to be my
I'm
listener.
listening.
All right. So yeah, I to continue on with this idea of empathizing into perspectives that may be wildly different than your own, and maybe at least on the surface very negative. Um, I mean, I think that this is one of the huge values of empathy, in especially in on a societal level, but maybe even on a personal or familial level as well.
So you're really interested in looking at the role that this process could play, or empathy in general, could play in having people with widely divergent and perhaps even negative perspectives, and how that might be a healing force.
Yeah, I don't I had this experience where my parents, who never used to be wildly engaged in politics in the way that they are, started to watch Fox News, and they got really into it, especially my mom. And
So you watched your parents being absorbed into Fox News.
yeah, and I saw my mom adopt a lot of the more extreme ideas that are portrayed on Fox News.
So you saw your mother really, in particular, being just adopting the viewpoints that were expressed by Fox News.
Yeah, and so when I talk to her about issues that are happening in the country or in the state or locally, her almost everything she says is colored by what she sees on Fox News.
So you're just seeing her parroting basically ideas that aren't really her own, that are she's just inherited from Fox News.
Yeah, and I saw the damage that that adopting a certain set of ideas, especially kind of that lean really heavily in one direction and not listening to the other side can have on a person and their relationships with other people.
So you've seen firsthand basically the damage that can happen when somebody really has a very highly unbalanced perspective on what's going on. We're not willing to look at opposing ideas or different ideas.
Yeah, and so for her, people on the left are evil. And and so I'll just finish with this, like neither people on the right or the left, as extreme as they may be, are they're not they're not idiots. They're not stupid. They're right. They are thinking about ideas, and I think it's it's worth listening to. It's worth trying to empathize with anyone, regardless of where they're coming from, and regardless where you are. I think it can be healing. It can be good. I think it's a force for good.
Yeah. So um, basically, you see enormous value in people with widely different ideas, perspectives to communicate without rancor, basically.
Yeah, good. Thank you for
Thank
listening.
you. Uh, our time, our 1 hour is up, but I want, can we, what should we do, Edwin?
What do you want to do, Jody?
I just love this. I mean, I'm
Okay,
happy to keep going. I do have a
let's,
meeting right on the hour that I'm going to need to
okay.
hop off for.
So we just
But
go for another 15 minutes with the
I think
empathy
that's great.
circle because I think it's a grounding for our work. So it's good to do this.
Yeah, and thank you, Garrett, for being willing to speak so much today, because people keep choosing Garrett to to be their listeners, and I think it's great to kind of initiate you. I think
So,
it's
William, do you want to continue for the
Yeah,
next
I'd
15
like to speak to
minutes?
Jody if that's
okay.
possible.
Sure, I'm
Um,
listening.
um, this is on one level terrifying to me, the amount of empathy horsepower that's present in this is Zoom meeting right now. I'm overwhelmed.
So on one level, you're overwhelmed by the amount of empathy horsepower, you call it, that is present here in this meeting.
Right, and I find myself having difficulty concentrating at times because
Hmm.
I'm my inner critic is dancing on my brain.
So you're sometimes having a hard time staying focused because of your inner critic.
Right. Um, and I'm really, really grateful for you and Garrett being involved with this.
And yeah, you're feeling grateful that Garrett and I have been able to be a part of this.
Right. And I'm hoping I can get some links to some of your work somehow.
Okay, and you're hoping to get links to some of the work
Yeah,
that Garrett's been doing. And
right.
I haven't published anything yet, but I'm working on quite a bit, by the way.
And I feel heard.
Okay, thank you. I guess that means it's my turn. Um, I would like to talk to Bill because I haven't had a chance to talk to you yet. I'm just going to go back to the notes. What I have been finding as I am involved in empathy circles is that my mind goes completely blank when I'm empathizing and I forget anything that I wanted to say.
So what you're experiencing when you're participating in empathy circles, that your mind goes completely blank and you forget about what you plan to say.
Yeah. And so for that reason, today I've been jotting down some notes.
And so that's the reason you've been jotting down some notes today.
Okay. And so since we're talking a bit about, I know we've been talking about some political stuff, but then also a lot of autism. And this is something that's on my mind just because of my conversations with Garrett and then also with my sister whose son is autistic. So I'd like to talk a little bit about autism.
So we've been talking about autism and also in the political sphere, but you wanted to focus on autism, talking about empathy and autism.
And I guess this does straddle both worlds because of some of the recent comments made by Elon Musk.
And it does straddle both worlds because of the recent comments by Elon Musk.
So I'm sure that all of you have seen what he has said about empathy being, what does he call it, the downfall of Western civilization, which I find interesting.
Yeah, so you're characterizing when he said, but he talked about empathy being a bug or a downfall of Western civilization.
And I think that plays back into some of those negative definitions that people have of autism, seeing it as more of a reactive process that can lend itself to that thing that Daniel was talking about, where you're taking on something else that's negative that you shouldn't be taking on.
So you mentioned the negative aspect. You said autism. I don't know if you meant empathy.
I
Um,
said empathy. That's what I did
yeah.
make a little mistake.
Okay, that's right. So you're saying, and you're concerned about those negative characterizations of both.
And so the thing that's coming to my mind is the fact that Elon Musk is on the spectrum. If that being the case, if he actually doesn't see the value of empathy, and I would like to bring this around and have Garrett chime in on this with his thoughts as well. But for somebody to boldly say that empathy is categorically bad for society, I have to wonder if that is in some way informed by his autism diagnosis.
So you're wondering that Elon Musk is on the spectrum, and so therefore you're wondering whether then his neurotypology then makes him blind to the to what empathy really is.
Yeah, I feel heard.
Okay. Edwin?
Yep, listening.
So uh yeah. So again, I think that what empathy is to me is this energy field of communication that exists throughout the universe.
And for you, empathy is this kind of an energy field that just exists throughout the universe.
Right, we interpret it. Right now, the cells in my body are digesting my breakfast, but they have no idea that we're talking about political stuff, or they couldn't care. And I could not begin to perform the digestive work that they do. Yet somehow we coalesce into a living being.
And you're just saying that this your body, all these separate functions coalesce into a human being, and you
Right.
don't aren't aware of all the individual stuff that's happening in the body.
Right. Like I don't question my stomach cell saying, are you going to really accept this type of lipid?
Yeah, you're not asking the your body cells if they're going to accept lipid, and you're kind of being a little bit
Right.
humorous about it.
That's right. And then my stomach cell doesn't ask me, says, are you really going to watch that show again tonight?
Yeah, you're not like your cells aren't asking you about your decision on watching a TV show.
Yet we both depend upon each other to exist.
And you're just seeing this interdependence
Yeah.
in your body.
In this August scientific, I'll go on a limb a bit. My wife was listening to something called the telepathy tapes.
And your wife was listening to the program called the Telepathy Tapes.
Yeah, and it's it seems to be rigorous. I mean, I heard the tapes, but I don't, but it's basically nonverbal autistic kids who have been tested and demonstrate telepathy.
And it's a tape about autistic kids that can't that have telepathy
Yeah,
or practice it.
they're being tested about it,
Oh,
and
they're being tested for telepathy.
they're tested. Yeah, and an incidental is that this kid's mother couldn't hide the Halloween candy because he always knew where it was.
And the example is the kid was hiding, or she couldn't hide the candy because he just through telepathy knew where it was.
Right. And those mothers were told to say he's not there, um, or she wasn't there, but really they are there. And when given tools like keyboards and other things like that and therapy, they can learn to communicate.
Oh, so it was said about the some people with autism that they're not there, but if they have the right tools, that they can communicate, given the correct tools.
Yeah. Thanks. I feel for it.
Okay, so we just have about 8 minutes, I guess. Maybe we can just open it up to any comments, discussions. We just mentioned we meet uh, we meet on Tuesdays. Jody and I have been meeting here. Everybody's welcome to join. And also on Saturdays, I do have another group at 10 o'clock Pacific time where we're meeting, kind of working on this project. And the core of the project, just for Garrett, is to develop what I call the holistic empathy circle of empathy model, definition model, which is there's a little video of a presentation. I don't know if you had a chance to see that, but sort of defining empathy is what we're doing right now. So as you listen to someone, you're sensing into their experience, which is what we're calling kind of a basic empathy, and it's on the definition model of Carl Rogers. So Carl Rogers would kind of define empathy as, us listening to each other. There's another aspect of empathy, which is self-empathy. So we sense into ourselves, and how we do that. And there's an imaginative empathy, which is kind of a role playing that we can take on roles, which is another sort of aspect of empathy in the model. And then there's the holistic empathy, which is not just the individuals empathizing with each other, but sort of the wholeness of the group, quality of the level of empathy in the group. So it's about reciprocal, mutual, kind of a holistic empathy. So that's sort of the basics of the model, taking it out of the individualistic, that you're just an individual empathizing, but that it's actually a relationship, that we're all in this relationship. And people talk often about, hey, being in an empathy circle, they feel that sense of connection, that quality of, being heard. And so bringing in that aspect into, and I think that often, and in fact, Elon Musk, he talks about um, sort of a societal empathy. So I think he's sort of hinting towards the mutual
Mm.
empathy. So I'm not like, oh, Elon Musk is terrible and stuff. I think for me, it's just that it's like we're talking past each other, because we're just talking about different phenomena.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that goes along with some of the other negative definitions that are out there that when you actually read their definitions and you understand more of what it is they're against, you realize, oh, okay, maybe we have more in common than we thought we did, but we're just using the same word to mean different things. And I would add to what Edwin was saying earlier about welcoming everybody to join these meetings. We've gotten to the point that we're kind of rehashing the same things over and over. And so, like, we are super aligned in the way that we view this. And we would just love to add more perspectives to what we're discussing on Tuesdays. And I haven't been able to join the Saturday meetings, but at least for our Tuesday meetings, I feel like we could use some multiplicity of thoughts on this.
My experience with the empathy cafes every Sunday for 2 hours, I see an overlap between group therapy and the empathy circle.
Hmm.
It's interesting. It's like free therapy in a way, although it's a dangerous ground. But certainly I agree, there's a feeling of a group consciousness that emerges after an hour that's quite profound.
Hmm.
Yeah, and that,
Especially because not it hasn't been dominated by one person.
mhm.
we've all been able to take turns and really get a feel for how other people feel about the topic. I think that's powerful.
And that helps build the relational empathy or the holistic empathy that everyone has a voice and is included and has that level aspect of equality to it. Yeah, Garrett?
Oh, I was going to say is I definitely feel this kind of group therapy feeling or this group empathy, but I also feel um, that it's not easy. It takes a lot of effort. Like my mind is it's a little more tired than when I joined the group. You know, it's kind of like a workout in a way, and maybe your capacity grows as you do it more, but.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like that speaks to the fact that maybe I'm not doing it enough. You know, what am I doing when other people are talking if I don't feel tired after listening so
Mm.
intently to them? Maybe I'm thinking about other things or I'm not empathizing as effectively or as often as I should. I don't know.
You're not
Yeah.
alone in feeling that tiredness that comes with the territory.
Yeah.
So
And
it's
the,
exhausting to attend that closely to
and the
another.
exercise is a good model too, because it is the more you exercise it, in terms of neuroscience, right? When neurons fire together, they wire together. So by practicing it, you're rewiring your brain so those neural networks are getting, you know, deeper, and it gets easier with time because you've got wiring those neural networks to put it into neuroscience language.
Yeah, it makes me what's the word? Concerned about something that I am concerned about a lot with my work, and that is how do we get people to care, and how do we get people to do the hard work of empathy if they're not inclined to do that.
I'd like to say something to do that. I think, in my experience, it's initially harder, not so much because we practice and we get better at it. I feel like because we learn not to do as much. We are, as humans, when we interact with each other, we're, in my experience, for the most part, slightly in a tonus, like we tense up. The closer we get to each other, more tension tend to happen. And when we're in this process, we kind of learn to actually trust each other, to actually become one with each other. And that's unusual. That's not what we used to. And so anything we do has a connotation of accomplishment and effort because that's how we were brought up, that's how we're conditioned. But this works the opposite way, the less effort we put into it. Because listening is, think about that. If you really are open and you're listening, you don't have to do much. You just really reflect, letting somebody else come to you and reflecting that back. It's actually, Ingrid always talks about that. It's kind of liberating because the other time you have to think about what am I going to say? Do I have a good idea what to tell them? And so on. You know what I'm talking about. Here, your job is very clearly defined. All you do is listening. And that, I think, what more happens to us is that our normal speed is backing on up on us, and it feels like tiring. But if we allow us to sit in this, more settled, then it's energizing. To me, it's very energizing. You
And
know?
I think to add to that, it reminds me of and I have to hop off right now, but I just wanted to add this. There's a study that was done by Daryl Cameron at Penn State. I think that's where he is. But they gave people the opportunity to choose either to just, they had decks of cards with faces on them. And they could choose from this deck of cards in order to, and the goal with this deck was feel the emotion that the person is exhibiting on the card, or you can choose from this deck over here where you just name the emotion. And what they found is that people were much more willing to choose from the deck where all they had to do was just name the emotion. So they didn't have to really deeply engage with the person on the card. And so one of the discussion points that they took away from that is that there was no relationship involved in that interaction with the person on a card. But the takeaway is that when you focus on relationships, hopefully that overrides that emotional and cognitive discomfort because you recognize that you're getting something out of it. So rather than it just being like just focusing on the cognitive load or the emotional load, focusing on there is actually something really beneficial that comes out of it. And anyway, so that's my 2 cents, and I've got to head out. So I'll see you later.
Okay, see you next
Thank
week.
you,
See you
Jody.
next week. Bye.
Okay, well, we could bring it to a close too. The overall, the Empathy Center, if you go to theempathycenter.org, is, our mission is to, create a culture of empathy and a movement to do it. So it's going to take a movement, Garrett, to, bring more people into it. It's like everything, civil rights, whatever, a movement gets built. So we're, creating a movement. And part of that is to have clear definitions of what we're talking about. That I don't know if you know Dan Batson. He did a lot of research in empathy, and he says there's all these different definitions. You got to have your own definition clearly defined, and just stick to it. So that's what we're trying to do, is get a clear definition of what we mean by it, and then also have that framework so we can map other criticisms or other definitions onto it. Like, how does that fit? Does it fit in, or is it outside? And so that's one of the kind of the intentions of this group that we're forming. So, okay, well, we can bring it to a close. I don't know if you're thinking of joining us on a regular basis, but we'd love to have you join us again, Garrett, and whoever wants to join. Again, I'm here Saturdays, 10 o'clock, to continue. And
Thank you, Garrett. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, glad that you join us.
Bye-bye.
See you guys.
All right, take care, everybody.
Bye.